Welcome to a place where we do not speak of cheap tricks to win over women, but instead delve into inner strength, the true source of lasting attraction. If I told you that just 2 words could make a woman remember you long after your first conversation, would you believe it? Not sweet talk, nor some mystical seduction hack, but 2 seemingly simple words that can radically shift how others, especially women, perceive you. The irony? Most of us have heard these words before. We even say them daily. But why have they never worked? Because we utter them unconsciously, without intention, without presence, without backbone. Today, I'll show you how to wield those 2 words as your sharpest tools in communication and self-expression, as a man who knows who he is and what he seeks. 1. I want, the signal of a man in control of himself. In every interaction in life, from work, relationships, to self-perception, every word and every action stems from one of 2 opposing states, active or reactive. And the boundary between these 2 often lies in a phrase that seems deceptively simple: I want. Most people live in reactive mode. They wait for signals from the outside, looks, praise, approval, before adjusting their behavior accordingly. This is a dependent way of living, a life spent constantly guessing what others want, think, or need, then reshaping oneself to avoid standing out, risking discomfort, or going against the grain. In such an environment, personal desire becomes blurred, trimmed down, replaced by safe behaviors that often betray what we truly believe is right. When a person utters the phrase "I want" with firmness, clarity, and no evasion, it signals that they no longer live reactively. They have shifted into an active state. That statement is an internal decision, made without waiting for anyone else's permission or validation. It declares that this person knows what they are doing, what they are pursuing, and is prepared to act. This is not recklessness nor stubbornness. It is the outcome of self-awareness and inner discipline, foundations intrinsic to the Stoic way of life. Stoicism places no value in controlling others. Its sole focus is on mastering oneself. According to this philosophy, the only domain we truly own is our own thoughts, decisions, and actions. Everything external, others' attitudes, life circumstances, fortune, is beyond our command, and thus should never dictate our emotions or choices. When someone regularly says, "I want," with conscious clarity, they are embodying this very core, governing their actions and choices rather than being governed by circumstance. The proactive person does not wait for opportunities. They create them. They don't hold back until receiving approval. They state what they want from the start. This is especially evident in social communication, where most conversations are based on probing and guesswork. Instead of saying, "If you're free, maybe we could meet," the proactive person says, "I'd like to invite you to dinner this Friday." The former is a feeler, the latter a declaration. It differs not just in grammar, but in energy. The energy of waiting versus the energy of initiating. Being proactive doesn't mean being rigid. It doesn't rule out flexibility. But flexibility isn't the same as losing direction. A person may adapt their approach when met with obstacles, but they don't alter their core desire out of fear of others' reactions. They know what lies within their power and pour their energy into that, without needing a guarantee of agreement or support. Another important point: When we don't clearly express what we want, vagueness breeds mistrust. Others can't read our minds, and hesitation invites doubt. By contrast, someone who knows what they want and dares to say it is often seen as trustworthy and grounded. They don't need to appear attractive. Clarity itself is a form of magnetism, for it conveys the message, I know myself well enough to not need to hide. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies logos, reason, and nothing is more rational than a clearly defined desire, expressed with timeliness and care. Reason is not just about analysis, it's about acting rightly, unshaken by emotion. Every time we say, I want, with awareness and responsibility, we invoke logos to shape reality rather than letting reality shape us. When we bring I want into daily life, what matters isn't whether others respond the way we hope. What matters is that we are practicing agency, asserting our right to govern thought and action. In a world thick with comparisons, expectations, and judgments, to speak one's desire openly is the most refined act of rebellion against dependency on others' perceptions. I want, when spoken by someone who knows themselves, is a quiet declaration. I am living on my terms, not because I need to be acknowledged, but because I have already acknowledged myself. One of the most defining traits of a person with inner strength is the ability to take full responsibility for their choices, regardless of outcome. The phrase, I want, may seem simple, but when voiced by someone who truly knows themselves, it becomes a committed act. It's no longer just an expression of desire, but an admission. I stand behind this choice, and I take full ownership of its consequences. In many cases, people avoid stating their desires not because they lack them, but because they fear the responsibility that comes with voicing them. Vagueness is often a defense mechanism against failure or rejection. By saying nothing clearly, we avoid confronting others' reactions. Yet in doing so, we also relinquish control over our lives. Stoicism sees clearly that life is a sequence of uncontrollables, including others' responses, outcomes of effort, and unforeseen events. But what this philosophy constantly emphasizes is our absolute control over how we choose and how we respond to what unfolds. So when a person says, I want, in the spirit of Stoicism, what he is doing is placing himself at the center of action, leaving no room for avoidance, blame, or the hope that someone else will take responsibility. I want is no longer a tentative suggestion. It becomes a declaration. This is the path I've chosen, and I am willing to face what comes. Whether in career, relationships, or life's major decisions, stating clearly what we want means embracing consequences as a natural part of action, not something to fear or escape. Those who lack the courage to express their true desires often resort to blaming circumstances or others when things go awry. They might say, I never really wanted that anyway, or I only did it because I thought it's what others preferred. Such words may soften accountability, but they erode personal sovereignty. In contrast, daring to say, I want, from the outset, even if met with rejection, failure, or misunderstanding, is a far more valuable act because it reflects the readiness to bear responsibility with maturity. Stoicism does not promote recklessness or obstinacy. It champions mindful choice. The Stoic understands that success is never guaranteed, but still chooses to act if the action aligns with inner values. In a volatile world, the Stoic does not seek certainty. they seek responsible agency. And "I want" encapsulates that very ideal. When someone says, "I want to change jobs," they are not merely expressing ambition. They are declaring their acceptance of the risks, hardships, and unknowns that come with that path. When someone says, "I want to commit to this person," they aren't asking for assurance, but pledging action for the sake of connection, despite the inevitable uncertainties. And in all cases, they blame no one if outcomes fall short, because the choice was theirs, and they are prepared to carry its weight. The true power of "I want" lies in its eradication of ambiguity in thought and action. It lets others know who you are, what you seek, and what you're willing to trade to get there. That clarity builds trust, a rare quality in a society where most interactions are veiled in pretense, probing, and concealment. Moreover, when someone trains themselves to say "I want" deliberately, they are continually reminding themselves of their agency. And agency, in Stoic thought, is essential to inner freedom. Regardless of results, the person who acts from will and conscious clarity won't live with regret. Because what matters most is not how things turn out, but whether we lived in alignment with what we believe is right. Therefore, the phrase "I want" should never be taken lightly. When spoken from the posture of responsibility, it is a profound expression of strength, maturity, and personal freedom, the very virtues that all who live by the Stoic spirit strive to embody. 2. The compromising mindset, a threshold to oblivion. In modern society, maintaining a polite, agreeable, and conflict-free attitude is often seen as a standard of civility. Yet, taken too far, this excessive agreeableness becomes the very reason many lose themselves. In countless interactions, people don't say what they truly think, don't express what they genuinely want, for one reason alone: fear of offending others, fear of being labeled selfish, fear of rejection, or fear of being seen as confrontational drives many to choose the safer route: silence, nodding, agreeing, and saying things like, "Whatever works, you decide," or "as long as you're happy." While these words may sound courteous and gentle, they are in fact a quiet retreat from the center of the conversation. Over time, that person ceases to be a contributor, a guide, or a shaper of the relationship, and becomes someone who merely reacts to what others want. When compromising behavior is repeated often enough, it crystallizes into a dull character, not because the person lacks original thoughts, but because they've grown too used to suppressing them for the sake of harmony. Ironically, this desire for harmony is precisely what makes them forgettable. In others' minds, they leave behind no strong impression, nothing to agree with wholeheartedly, nothing to challenge, and over time, they become easily replaceable in any relationship. Stoicism does not oppose flexibility or empathy, but it insists that self-mastery is the foundation of a meaningful life. When someone routinely forfeits their right to voice an opinion just to avoid upsetting others, what they surrender isn't just a viewpoint, it's their intellectual freedom. They hand over the reins of their emotions, decisions, and even identity to others, often to people who never asked for such control. Compromise born of fear is often masked in noble reasons. I don't want tension. I want to keep the peace. I want them to feel comfortable. But deep down, most of these choices stem from anxiety over not being accepted. When a person cares too much about how others perceive them, they become willing to trade away their values for the comfort of perceived approval. From that moment, the relationship, be it romantic, professional, or social, starts to lose balance. A healthy relationship doesn't require constant agreement. It requires both parties to express their positions honestly and respectfully. If one person always says, "whatever," "anything's fine," or "you decide," their presence eventually fades, even to the point of being perceived as lacking depth. By contrast, someone who clearly states what they want, even if it invites disagreement, is recognized as a person with direction and integrity. The habit of compromising to avoid disapproval not only alters how others perceive us, but also distorts how we perceive ourselves. When someone repeatedly denies their own thoughts, they begin to question their value. They grow doubtful of their decision-making ability and gradually lose faith in their own instincts. Over time, this leads to a sense of confusion, a lack of direction, and a dependency on external opinions, states entirely at odds with the Stoic ideal of self-governance. Obscurity is not a sudden destination. It's the accumulated result of countless unnecessary compromises. Every silence that should have been a statement, every agreement made against one's will, every nod offered out of fear of disapproval, each becomes a brick in the wall, separating us from our true selves. Those who follow Stoic thought understand that to preserve real harmony, one must sometimes disrupt superficial ease, not to provoke, but to protect the inner self from the quiet wounds of constant concession. And that begins by saying, "I want," instead of "whatever works." One of the defining traits of a strong presence is the ability to stand firm in one's beliefs. When someone can articulate their thoughts, clarify their convictions, and refuse to dodge what they know is right, they forge a clear identity, a distinctive character that cannot be mistaken. On the other hand, those who frequently abandon their views or hide their true thoughts in pursuit of peace gradually lose their clarity, and with it, the respect of others. In relationships, personal or professional, respect arises not just from good listening or proper behavior, but from the ability to stand firm on what one believes, even in the face of resistance. If a person cannot express their views, others will struggle to trust them. Because in any meaningful collaboration, trust requires clarity, and clarity cannot exist if someone won't speak their truth. Abandoning one's viewpoint not only weakens personal identity, but also erodes the ability to navigate relationships. If a person always agrees, never says "I disagree" or "I see it differently," it becomes difficult for others to know what they truly think, need, or where their boundaries lie. In time, that lack of clarity creates distance, even when the conversations seem pleasant and agreeable on the surface. In Stoic philosophy, the ideal person isn't someone who gets along with everyone, but someone who stays true to their core values. This doesn't mean being stubborn or always insisting on one's way. It means acting from reason, principle, and self-awareness. When a person silences their inner voice for the sake of outer peace, they abandon that core. In such cases, yielding is no longer a rational act. It becomes a compromise rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, isolation, or judgment. A person who doesn't dare express their true thoughts is often mistaken as lacking depth. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they choose not to show it. Over time, this affects how others see them, not as someone grounded or purposeful, but as someone who goes along, goes with the flow. When nothing about them is clear enough to lead or inspire, respect quickly fades. Respect in every form is tied to consistency. People respect those they know to have principles. They may not always agree, but knowing that someone isn't easily swayed by flattery or social pressure builds trust. In contrast, someone who always agrees, always shifts depending on the situation or the person, becomes difficult to rely on. No one knows when they'll change again, or whether they truly stand for anything at all. When someone refuses to express their views, they also refuse responsibility for what unfolds in the relationship. They let others decide, lead, and set direction, surrendering their agency and becoming merely a follower. In such cases, they cease being a partner and become an accessory. And someone who follows without a voice will eventually lose their place at the table. Stoicism teaches that living by reason means acting with proper awareness and always taking responsibility for one's choices, saying, "I think," or "I disagree because," is not opposition. It is an act of honesty, both with oneself and others. A responsible person is not someone who is always right, but someone who stands for what they believe is right, even when it's difficult to do so. Abandoning personal convictions may help avoid immediate conflict, but over time, it erodes others' respect, and more importantly, self-respect. No one can maintain dignity while continuously avoiding the truth within themselves. And no one can sustain a lasting relationship if their only role is to agree without question. 3. How to use "I want" in daily life. In everyday conversation, many people tend to avoid expressing directly what they want. Instead, they resort to vague suggestions, roundabout phrasing, or simply shift the burden of decision-making to someone else. Phrases like, "If you're free, maybe we can hang out," "You decide," or "I'm fine with whatever," are common, especially in romantic relationships or situations where the speaker is expected to take the lead. While these expressions may sound polite, gentle, and pleasant to the listener, they in fact reflect a lack of confidence, direction, and willingness to assume responsibility. When someone fails to clearly state their desire, they not only confuse the listener or force them to guess, but also place themselves in a passive position in the conversation. This diminishes the inner strength of their words and makes it harder for others to know who they are, what they need, and whether they can be trusted. Stoicism always emphasizes clarity in thought and action. This philosophy does not encourage vague speech to maintain harmony or avoid conflict, but insists on transparency, because only when thought is clear can action carry weight. In this context, saying "I want" is not merely an expression of personal desire, but a demonstration of responsibility for one's own choices. It's a declaration that the speaker is taking the lead, rather than waiting for others to dictate their course. For example, instead of saying, "If you'd like, we could meet up," a person who practices clarity would say, "I'd like to invite you to dinner this Friday." The latter does not impose pressure or demand agreement, but it immediately lets the listener understand your intention. They can accept or decline, but at the very least, they are responding to a deliberate proposal. This creates a more effective, less ambiguous, and more purpose-driven conversation. Clarity in communication plays an equally critical role in work and social relationships. When you enter a meeting and say, "I'd like to offer a different perspective on this issue," you demonstrate independent thinking, accountability for your view, and a desire to contribute to a shared solution. Conversely, if you simply say, "I'm not really sure, let's go with whatever everyone thinks," you remove yourself from the position of a creator and shift into that of a passive responder. It's important to note that stating what you want is not the same as demanding or imposing. The difference lies in purpose and tone. A Stoic doesn't voice desire to control others, but to affirm that they are living in alignment with their inner direction. Self-mastery doesn't come from always getting what one wants, but from having the courage to express it clearly, transparently, and without dependence on external reactions. In reality, those who regularly articulate what they want, calmly without negative emotion or coercive expectations, tend to earn more respect. They are seen as trustworthy because others know where they stand, what they want, and how they act. Meanwhile, those who stay silent or speak in circles often leave others confused or uncertain, creating distance in communication. Clarity also helps establish healthy boundaries in relationships. When you say, "I want quiet time in the mornings to focus on work," you're helping others understand your needs rather than silently enduring and later feeling violated or overwhelmed. Setting boundaries through clear language supports healthy relationships, unclouded by repressed emotions or prolonged misunderstandings. "I want" is one of the simplest phrases, yet it powerfully reflects intentional thinking. It does not require others to accept your statement, but it demands that you be transparent with yourself. In a world saturated with information, emotion, and social pressure, expressing your needs directly and clearly is a sign of inner stability, a quality Stoicism holds as essential to a meaningful life. In long-term relationships, one common cause of fading connection is the gradual disappearance of clearly expressed personal desires. Time, routine, and the pace of modern life reduce conversations to brief exchanges focused on logistics or daily tasks. Phrases like, "We can do whatever this week, you decide," or "I'm good with anything," begin to replace intentional dialogue. When this happens repeatedly, the relationship loses its natural growth and devolves into a familiar, lifeless rhythm. The phrase "I want," when used at the right time and in the right way, becomes an effective compass for sustaining and deepening connection between two people. In the Stoic spirit, articulating one's desire is not a selfish act, but a responsible one. A Stoic doesn't let emotions steer or allow the relationship to drift. They take initiative, maintain connection, and lead conversation with clarity and consistency in action. For instance, in a long-term relationship, when one person says, "I'd like us to take a walk together on Saturday night without our phones," it's not just an invitation to a simple activity, but a way to communicate a desire for presence, attention, and genuine connection. It sends the message that this relationship still matters, that the speaker is still invested in the quality of their interaction, not letting it fade. "I want" also plays a critical role in addressing distance or latent conflict in long-term relationships. When one partner senses a decline in depth or connection, saying, "I'd like to better understand what's been troubling you lately," expresses a proactive desire to understand rather than wait or silently speculate. This kind of initiative not only resolves tension, but strengthens trust, a core element of any enduring bond. In shared living environments, between spouses, partners, or coworkers, "I want" is also a tool for establishing personal boundaries in a gentle but effective manner. For example, instead of silently resenting an invaded personal space, one might say, "I'd like an hour of quiet each morning to read before starting my day." This statement is not a complaint or demand, but a clear expression of personal need. When boundaries are defined, daily friction is reduced and mutual respect increases. However, using "I want" in long-term relationships requires a balance between candor and empathy. A Stoic does not speak to control or impose, but to create an honest space for connection. They understand that their desire won't always be accepted, but expressing it intentionally is vital to maintaining relationships built on transparency and maturity. Proactively voicing what one wants also helps prevent emotional buildup, a common issue in long-term relationships. When someone continually withholds their needs, they often begin to feel neglected, unappreciated, or disrespected, even when no harm was intended. Prolonged silence is often the true cause of small misunderstandings, growing into major rifts over time. "I want" in a long-term relationship is not a declaration of ego, but the mark of a mature individual, actively preserving the quality of a bond they value. They don't wait for problems to escalate. They use language as a tool to guide, adjust, and enrich the shared experience. From a Stoic viewpoint, relationships should not be maintained through impulsive emotions or momentary reactions. Instead, they require intentions, clarity, and the stable expression of needs. The phrase "I want," woven naturally into daily conversation, is a simple yet profound way to ensure that relationships not only endure, but evolve in the right direction. 4. Confidence is not arrogance, and self-mastery begins with tone. Confidence is a quality universally admired, yet often misunderstood. The line between confidence and arrogance is rarely found in what someone says, but in how they say it, especially in their attitude and composure when engaging with others. In Stoic philosophy, confidence is not merely the courage to speak one's mind. It is the ability to manage emotion while doing so, maintaining respect for both oneself and the listener, regardless of circumstance. A truly confident person has no need to speak loudly, to assert themselves through grand declarations, or to seek others' approval to feel worthy. Instead, they operate from a stable inner foundation, clear about what they want, and unafraid to express it with clarity. When they say "I want," it is neither a demand, a command, nor a means of control. It is a deliberate expression of personal position. Truth's confidence always comes with calm. The one who voices their desires gently, without defensiveness or entitlement, has already accepted that the outcome may not align with their expectation. Yet this doesn't cause hesitation or retreat. They will still speak their truth, because they understand their worth does not hinge on agreement. This is most evident in everyday interactions, especially in moments prone to misunderstanding or emotional tension. For instance, when someone says, "I'd like to meet and discuss what happened the other day," they are not applying pressure, but opening a door. They do not demand agreement, but they also do not avoid expressing what matters. The respect lies in this. They do not impose, nor do they manipulate with guilt, or expect others to yield. The key difference between confidence and arrogance lies in purpose and self-awareness. The arrogant act out of a need to affirm their ego. They need validation to feel worthy. As a result, when met with disagreement or rejection, they easily become angry, dismissive, or disrespectful. By contrast, the confident understand that the value of any relationship, be it personal, professional, or social, does not lie in winning, but in whether both parties can speak honestly and respectfully. From a Stoic view, confidence begins with inner governance. One who is not ruled by circumstances, not swayed by passing emotions, and not blinded by ego, is someone capable of expressing themselves with balance. When they speak, they do so not to dominate, but because it is the right thing to say, and because they are not attached to controlling the outcome. Their tone remains steady, composed, and trustworthy. Composure in communication is not apathy or indifference. It reflects a mind trained not to be shaken by external fluctuation. A confident person may face rejection or disagreement, but they do not respond with defensiveness. They listen, adjust if needed, but never lose their voice. They continue to express themselves with firmness, consistency, and without being governed by negative emotion. One of the clearest signs of confidence is the ability to maintain respect in all situations. When someone says, "I want," and is rejected, but replies with composure like, "That's okay, thank you for listening," it reveals a mind trained to accept reality without sacrificing dignity. They need not alter their position to please, nor react bitterly when met with opposition. That steadiness generates a quiet strength, entirely distinct from the showmanship of arrogance. Therefore, confidence does not reveal itself through volume, word count, or the ability to draw a crowd. It manifests in the ability to stand firm with grace, to express one's wants clearly, without compromising respect for the other. This is the balanced state to which Stoic practice aspires: to act with reason, to speak from self-command, and to anchor calm as an unshakable foundation. In communication, words are not judged solely by their content, but by how they are delivered. The same sentence, spoken in different tones, can create opposite impressions. Tone, encompassing volume, pace, rhythm, emphasis, and expression, is a direct reflection of one's inner emotional state. And from a Stoic lens, tone is the most vivid expression of emotional self-mastery. A core Stoic principle is the cultivation of self-control. The Stoic does not seek to master the external world, but to master their own responses. Every word, every act must be guided by reason, not by fleeting emotion. So, when one speaks with haste, sharpness, or coercion, it signals they are ruled by internal turmoil, perhaps fear of rejection, anxiety, or a desire to force an outcome. By contrast, a person who governs their emotions speaks their desire clearly, but with a steady, calm tone, free of excessive expectation. This tone not only puts the listener at ease, but conveys a quiet message. The speaker is prepared to accept any outcome, yes or no, without compromising their mental state. This is the hallmark of a mind unshaken by circumstance, a core trait in Stoic thought. In many relationships, conflict does not stem from what is said, but from how it is said. A phrase like, "I want to feel more heard in this relationship," can come across as accusatory if delivered with tension, volume, or sarcasm. But spoken calmly, clearly, and without judgment, the same phrase becomes an opening to dialogue and understanding. The difference lies in the ability to regulate emotion before the words leave the mouth, a skill every Stoic diligently cultivates. Lack of self-control is often most visible in impulsive reactions. When someone feels challenged, they may lash out, interrupt, or raise their voice. These are rarely products of reason, but emotional defenses unchecked. The Stoic, however, understands that the pause between emotion and response is where reason has its power. They learn to observe emotion without letting it dictate tone or behavior. Tone also plays a crucial role in showing respect. One can say, "I disagree with this solution," and still make the other feel heard, if their tone signals respect and cooperation. But the same words, said with contempt, sarcasm, or interruption, easily provoke offense. Tone thus not only mirrors inner emotion, but shapes the quality of human interaction. The self-possessed do not speak too fast, nor too slow. They adjust pace and volume to suit the moment, ensuring the listener understands their intent without feeling coerced. They avoid whispering as a sign of insecurity and do not raise their voice to prove a point. They harmonize body language, eye contact, and tone into a coherent whole, instilling trust without needing to seek attention. Practically speaking, tone can be trained. One can learn to regulate breath, lower pitch when needed, and speak from emotional neutrality, especially in tense situations. Consistency in tone reflects consistency in mind, and a steady mind earns trust in conversation, in collaboration, and in long-term relationship building. In Stoic spirit, mastery of tone is not about persuading others. It is about staying loyal to one's own inner tranquility. Whether stating a view, expressing a desire, or facing disagreement, the one who maintains composure in their voice has already won the deeper battle against themselves. 5. Forging inner strength, a 7-day I Want challenge. In the cultivation of inner strength and personal fortitude, one essential element is the ability to think with intention. Intentional thought does not emerge naturally. It is the result of continuous practice, reinforced through small, repeated actions each day. In this context, the conscious use of the phrase "I want" becomes an effective exercise, a way to sharpen clarity of perception and strengthen the ability to guide one's behavior. Saying "I want" may seem like a simple act of communication, but in truth, it requires the speaker to go through a sequence of self-reflection. Before expressing a desire, one must pause to examine themselves. What is it they truly need? Why do they want it? And does it align with their core values? This chain of reasoning is itself a training ground for intentional thinking, where thought is no longer driven by circumstance or fleeting emotion, but by reason and deliberate choice. During the 7-day challenge, the goal is not to say "I want" as frequently as possible, but to create opportunities for the practitioner to develop the ability to identify their desires in specific situations with precision. Through systematic repetition, thinking patterns begin to shift. The practitioner moves from reactive living, merely responding to external conditions, toward proactive living, where speech and action are grounded in clearly defined principles. The habit of using "I want" mindfully also forces the practitioner to confront the boundaries of their inner world. Many, upon starting the challenge, may realize they don't truly know what they want, In many ordinary situations, they may hesitate, feel conflicted, or be so influenced by others' opinions that they struggle to identify personal desire. This is a sign that their thinking lacks an independent foundation. Being required to say, "I want," daily becomes a prompt to turn inward, to distill authentic desire rather than live according to external expectation. One of the greatest benefits of practicing "I want" is transparency in communication. When someone can articulate what they want, they no longer need to send ambiguous signals or hope others will guess correctly. This saves time, reduces misunderstanding, and fosters a more honest space for exchange. The listener also tends to appreciate this clarity as it reflects autonomy and personal responsibility, foundational elements of any healthy relationship. To sustain discipline throughout the 7-day challenge, practitioners need a system for tracking and reflection. Recording each day when "I want" was spoken, in what context, and how it felt, before and after, can serve as a powerful observational tool. Through this process, one not only performs the act, but also cultivates self-reflection, a core Stoic principle. For one who does not know what they are doing or why, growth in thought and behavior is impossible. More importantly, saying "I want" helps define personal boundaries. In many situations, people allow themselves to be swept up in others' needs to the point of losing sight of their own limits. The courage to voice what one wants, calmly and without imposition, is the first step in drawing a line, helping others see where it lies, and ensuring one does not lose themselves in the act of excessive appeasement. Intentional thinking is a state in which every decision and every response is guided by reason, not by haste or impulsive emotion. When "I want" is used as a tool for discipline, it ceases to be a superficial statement and becomes a process of reconfiguring one's inner framework. After 1 week of serious practice, the practitioner will likely sense a shift in how they think, speak, and make decisions. If this behavior is sustained beyond the 7-day threshold, it evolves from conscious action into natural habit, contributing to the development of character and resilience. At that point, "I want" is no longer merely a phrase. It becomes a visible sign of a well-trained inner life, clear, directed, and ready to own the consequences of its choices. The capacity to express desires clearly through "I want" should not be limited to any single domain. To develop personal strength comprehensively, the practitioner must apply this skill across multiple settings: personal spaces, family life, social relationships, and professional environments. Each context demands nuanced adjustments in tone, language, and demeanor, thus training the individual to remain flexible in interaction while holding firm to clarity and self-direction. In personal settings, using "I want" is the first step to building an honest connection between oneself and one's inner state. Upon waking each morning, the practitioner might ask, "What do I want today?" Not to outline a strict plan, but to identify the feelings, intentions, and desires present within. Answering this question truthfully marks the start of a deliberate day, unshackled from habit or emotional aimlessness. This is the Stoic path to wakefulness: to know what you pursue and to act with discernment rather than drift. Next comes the family setting, where our closest relationships are often taken for granted in how we communicate. Many avoid expressing desire to loved ones out of fear it might create tension, or because they believe family should just know. Yet expecting others to understand without expression breeds misunderstanding, frustration, and silent conflict. When someone says, "I want us to have dinner without phones," or "I want a quiet evening to rest," they are not only expressing personal needs, they are establishing healthy boundaries within intimate relationships. This fosters mutual respect and deepens understanding among family members. In broader social environments, friends, communities, study groups, or teams, stating "I want" allows one to remain clearly present within the group without undermining unity. For instance, when someone says, "I want us to hear every idea before making a final decision," they affirm their personal need while also contributing constructively. This kind of clarity enhances collaboration and casts the individual as someone with independent thought, willing to contribute, yet responsible toward the group. In the workplace, the ability to use "I want" tactfully and intentionally is an essential skill for increasing personal credibility and defining one's place within an organization. Statements like, "I want to take on more responsibility in this project," "I want to present my proposal at the next meeting," or "I want clearer feedback on my performance," reflect a proactive, growth-minded individual, unafraid to take initiative. Those who avoid stating their needs are often overlooked in competitive settings and may be viewed as lacking drive or leadership capacity. Every environment requires subtle adjustment in how "I want" is spoken, appropriate to context, yet always retaining clarity. Among friends, one might say, "I want to share something I've been thinking about a lot lately." In social settings, one could say, "I want to understand your view better before offering mine." These expressions are not only signs of autonomy, but also signals of a person actively building connection, not merely reacting. A key aspect of using "I want" across various settings is consistency of tone. Whether at home, at work, or in the community, the practitioner must maintain calm voice, clear language, and respectful attitude. This phrase is not a tool to influence or control others, but a means to express an intentional inner life, one that knows its limits and commits to honesty. When "I want" is trained and applied with flexibility, yet consistency across situations, it becomes a natural extension of the practitioner's way of being. Clarity is no longer a technique. It becomes the visible shape of a mind that has been forged, a mind that neither avoids nor obscures, nor depends on approval to exist. This is the very quality that Stoic philosophy calls us to live with intention, speak with substance, and act with full awareness. When I first began practicing the phrase "I want," I realized something seemingly simple but deeply revealing. Most of us don't actually know what we truly want. We let others choose the restaurant, set the plans, and shape our emotions, not because they force us to, but because we've grown used to living without pausing to ask ourselves, "What do I truly need?" Since becoming aware of this, I've adopted a small habit. Every morning, before picking up my phone, I write down a single sentence, "Today I want," not to outline some grand objective, but simply to reconnect with myself. Some days I write, "I want 10 minutes of silence before the day begins." Other days, "I want to call my mother just to hear her stories." And when applied to relationships, especially in moments prone to misunderstanding, I've learned to say, "I want us to understand each other better," rather than staying silent and expecting the other person to sense how I feel. The remarkable thing is, when we dare to express our needs with clarity and calm, others rarely react as negatively as we fear. On the contrary, they begin to respect us more, not because we demand it, but because we live in truth with ourselves. To me, "I want" is no longer just a phrase. It's how I train my thinking, act with intention, and stop avoiding my own emotions. It's part of my path toward a steady life, aligned with the Stoic spirit, clarity, autonomy, and freedom from dependency on external outcomes. If today's reflection awakened something within you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss future content. This isn't the journey of a single day. It's a lifelong practice. And if I were to leave you with one final thought, it's this: when you are clear with yourself, the world begins to become clear with you. I'll see you in the next video.